lesson, we will read an excerpt from Behind the Mountains and answer 2 short response questions. And our questions can be found after the reading, and we will explain how lines 26 through 33 contribute to the story. So after we read that part, we'll discuss how it could contribute to the story. And then we will have what is a central theme. So when we're looking for the theme, we want to be looking at what our characters learn, either a protagonist or even the antagonist. But seeing as how this is an excerpt, it would be a story that is picking up somewhere in the middle, and it also would not have a complete ending. It might also end somewhere if it was an entire book. So we're only getting a short glimpse of this text, and that is why they give us this blurb at the top. It explains what has happened previously. The narrator, her brother Moy, and her mother Man have just emigrated from Haiti to reunite with their family father in Brooklyn, New York. So emigrating is what an immigrant would do when they move from one place to another. That is what you would say emigration would be, the verb. And then now we also know that the narrator is a girl, and she has a brother and her mother with her. And we could also say reuniting with her father would be an exciting time for our young narrator's life. So that's laying out some background of our text here. Friday, December 22nd. We slept until noon, then ventured out to the street. The snow had stopped falling, but there was still a lot of it on the ground. The street was quiet. The red bricked row houses lined up like snow-capped soldiers standing at full attention. The snow now seemed to muffle things, even people who, as they walked past us, would keep their heads low, close to their chests, their entire bodies covered in layers of thick material, their faces wrapped with scarves, which even if they were looking at us, would barely allow us to see their eyes. It suddenly occurred to me that we looked like those people. Papa had gotten us sweaters, knit caps, scarves, coats, and rubber boots that made squishing noises each time we took a step. Out in the cold, I understood why the people walking past us didn't raise their heads, for each time I raised mine, my nose ran, my eyes watered, and my face twitched as though a million ice needles were being hammered into my skin. Each time I took a step, I kept slipping on ice patches, nearly falling down. Even though the sun was shining, it did nothing to warm me. Instead, it seemed allied with the chill, transforming itself into something I never knew existed, a cold sun. Needless to say, we were only outside for a few minutes. Man couldn't bear much more than that and had pleaded with Papa to take us back inside. Papa said we would soon get used to the cold, just as he has. But I don't think I will ever get used to this cold that seeps into your body all the way to your bones. Later, we live in a 2-bedroom apartment on the ground floor of one of the row houses owned by Frank. Man and Papa have the larger room, and I have a smaller one next to theirs. Poor Moy is sleeping in the front room again. So here we could say this would be our figurative language when she says her face twitched as though a million ice needles were being hammered into her skin. That would be a simile, a comparison using like or as. And we can also say that the characters would be living, if the brother doesn't have his own bedroom and he's sleeping in the front room, we could say they might be struggling financially, the family. We are waiting for a larger apartment upstairs, which will become available at the end of February. Then Moy will have his own room. Well, we could say that they're waiting, they're currently struggling, but they're coming up. After a brief trip outside, we spent the afternoon cooking and talking. Papa wanted to hear about everything that's happened in Beaujour since he's been gone. He had so many questions that even before we finished answering one question, he had already had another. It seemed like he had asked about everyone and everything he's ever known. So Beaujour would be a town or city in Haiti, and then Haiti would be an island country south of Florida, near Cuba. Moy appeared to enjoy answering the questions the most because he was finally getting to speak to Papa face to face, man to man. I feel as though I can see inside Moy's head. There must be something in him that feels complete now, just like something in me feels whole. Like a piece of me that's been missing for 5 years has finally been found. It's another cold day, but we decide to be brave and go out because Papa was going to take us shopping. We took a bus near our home to Flatbush Avenue, which gave us a chance to see more of Brooklyn without being too cold. I kept my face glued to the window, watching the streets go by. More row houses, lines of detached ones too, and then clusters of giant buildings that could house most of Port-au-Prince. That would be the capital of Haiti. Moy pointed out the parks, which were empty, the trees bared by the cold. None of Grambelina or Grampy Noisiel's mango, almond, and avocado trees would survive here in the cold. Man called our attention to churches, beauty parlors, and restaurants, all of them bigger than any buildings I had ever seen in Port-au-Prince. I could tell that these buildings amazed her too by their size and matching constructions, by the fact that there appeared to be so few people in them compared to how crowded they would have been in Port-au-Prince. Moy said the names of the mechanic shops and gas stations out loud as Papa corrected his pronunciation in English. The signs were not as colorful as the ones that Bose d'Azy made or as brightly embellished as the ones in Carrefour, but some were written in lights, which impressed Moy nonetheless. I wish Teresa could see all of this. She would be so amazed. Having spent even less time in Port-au-Prince than I have, Brooklyn would have been almost the more startling to her. Looking around, I kept thinking the same thing I did the first time I went to Port-au-Prince with Man. How can some people live in a small village in the mountains with only lamps for illumination at night, and others live in a city where every street corner had its own giant lamp? It made the world seem unbalanced somehow. This could also leave us somewhat of a theme here, because Haiti would be a country that struggles a lot economically and with their infrastructure, because that is what would be providing the lights, electricity. So our narrator is making a comparison, and here we don't exactly know who Therese is, but we could probably assume it's a friend of hers, because it wouldn't be family. Well, maybe it would be family, but we would assume the family members would be with them. So probably a friend. So she's saying that she has spent less time in Port-au-Prince than I have Brooklyn. So I'm not sure what you'd be saying with this one. If Port-au-Prince would be the city in Haiti, then she'd be referencing a friend she has from her village. Because notice here, Moy was asking about Beaujour, not Port-au-Prince. So this would be where they live. So she's thinking back on one of her friends. Now we'll look at our questions here. First question is asking us how lines 26 through 33 contribute to the story. Now that's kind of a strange question if we're looking at 26 to 33. Now this is the part where they come in from being outside, which was extremely cold, and they have, after a brief trip, we spent all afternoon cooking and talking. Papa wanted to hear about everything that's happened in Beaujour since he'd been gone. He had so many questions that even before we finished answering one question, he had already known another. It seemed like he had asked about everyone and everything he's ever known. Moy appeared to enjoy answering the questions, mostly because he was finally getting to speak to Papa face-to-face, man-to-man. I feel as though I can see inside Moy's head. There must be something in him that feels complete now, just like something in me feels whole, like a piece of me that's been missing for 5 years has finally been found. So the first thing I want to do here is restate our question. So you don't technically have to rewrite the part about the excerpt, especially if they're just giving us these lines here. So we could say lines 26 through 33 contribute to the story because. And then be thinking, how does this contribute to the story? We want to restate our question and provide our answer, but we still want to save something for our details we have to provide. So we could say it definitely shows that this family is now reunited, that they are happy to be back with their father, having this family time together, cooking and talking and catching up on everything. I believe it was 5 years they haven't seen their dad in person, so that is a really long time. And it definitely, we could also say something about contributing to the story. It makes sense as to why they're there, because the family, we know that our narrator, it doesn't seem so much that the mom and the sister and the brother are enjoying themselves in New York City, in Brooklyn, but because the weather changed and everything, and being away from their homelands. But we could say it shows the sacrifice that families will make to be together, or families can go through difficult times when they are separated, but then they can rejoice when they're back together. We could say something, it shows that the narrator, it shows why the narrator and her brother and her mom are in Brooklyn to reunite with the dad. We could also say there's a lot of different ways you can answer a short response question. So if we want to say here, because it shows lines 26 through 33 contribute to the story because the reader sees the narrator's happiness. So this would be our first opening answer here. Now, if we're going to say that these lines show the narrator's happiness, we could also say it's setting a tone of the story about, you could say, loved ones, like the familial bonds, something like this. So we could say here, if we say the narrator feels complete now that she is reunited with her father. And then we could add another, while the family is sitting together talking, the narrator knows that her brother is also, we could use another word besides happy. We could say we could say feels complete. Is that what they're going to say there? So we could say her brother also feels complete. And then we could add our analysis here. Wait, the narrator knows that her brother also feels complete while speaking to their dad. Something along these lines. And then for our final line here, a closing line, we want to go back to how it contributes to the story. We could say lines, or we'll say the lines show why the narrator is joyful despite the extremely cold weather that she does not like. So even though she is adjusting to this rough climate and a new place, she is happy because she's reunited with her father. So that's what these lines could show. But you can have many different answers that you want to say. You could say it shows why they're there in the first place. It shows the importance of family. You could say there it's developing a theme. It shows the importance of family. It shows that families can be extremely sad when they are separated from each other, but happy when they reunite. Anything like that. And then next, what is a central theme of Excerpt from Behind the Mountains? Now, if we notice, this kind of guides us into a question about theme, because we know that a big part of the story is families being together and how they are unhappy when they're separated. So here we could say a central theme of Excerpt from Behind the Mountains is the importance of family. And we could say, we'll give our details. The narrator is adjusting to life in a very cold new city, far away from her home country. We'll just leave it there, right? We'll say the narrator is adjusting to life in a very cold city, far away from her home country of Haiti. And then we could say, however, despite the extreme cold, we'll say the extreme climate change, the narrator feels complete because she is now living with her father. And we could say the story's central theme shows that when families are separated, it can cause feelings of sadness. But when families reunite, they are happy again. Something along these lines about a central theme. You could also say, we could use the lines about how it showed they were living and they are in kind of a difficult financial situation just because they have to wait in this one apartment till another apartment is available. So you could say something about how families will make sacrifices to provide for each other, because in this, we could assume the reason the dad was there in America before his family was he was getting everything set up so that they could have a nice home there. So we could say something along the lines of economic circumstances can be a driving factor of family separation, and maybe making something about how they made these sacrifices, the father made the sacrifice to live away from them and set them up with a better life. So that's what we could assume, at least. And part of a central theme is you are creating your own assumption, and as long as you provide some textual evidence, then you're okay. Because see, here we're talking about how she was in the extreme cold, but when she was sitting with her father, she felt complete once again. So that would be our evidence there. But you could have a theme, or a story, remember, can have many different themes. So this theme, we just focused on the importance of family, because this was a story about a family who was separated and then reunited. And you can find this reading, I forgot to mention at the beginning, in the lesson description. So if you go to the lesson description, you'll find a link to our story and the questions.